welcome back to the Convo Couch, everyone. Pasta Jardula here.
And I'm Fiorella.
Hey, fam, guess what else we got for you? Listen to this. Johnny's Dolphins back, fam. Johnny's Dolphins back. I put the, in the private chat, I put the link to the Rumble, guys. Do us a favor, get out there, share that Rumble link. We're about almost at 1,700 followers there on Rumble, and we've been getting a decent response as far as a lot of the people following us over there and sharing. So please continue to help us make that grow. Right now, we only have 22 people, so we need to share it on out. Let's do that and get that out there. I'm going to tweet it out right now myself, fam, on my tweeters. So that's out there, too. Of course, if you are a premium member, take a look at our Rockfin. See if you can watch it over there.
Mm-hmm.
That's always cranking over there. Fred Edwards usually hanging on out. We only have 4 people there right now, so let's share this out. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
And yeah, we do got to get started. I already have trolls in the chat. But
Which chat?
I just
YouTube?
won't address it. Yeah.
Of course.
So okay. So let's get started on this, since we are on the brink of nuclear war again. Because the UK has decided that they want to send depleted uranium shells to Ukraine, and that is an act of war. For any country, it would be an act of war, but the United States has already done this with Iraq. So has used these on Iraq, and so if the UK sends these to Ukraine, Russia has said they will respond. So we'll get to that. We'll talk about that and more with Vanessa as well, because a lot of people have been asking, saying, is Russia part of this whole thing? Is Russia part of the new world order? Are they part of this global agenda? The CBDCs, everything, all this stuff. You were on a panel discussing that with people who do believe that. Coincidentally, people that have never been to Russia. I'm not trying to rag on these people because they're friends of mine and colleagues, but it's different to really understand, because unfortunately it is a lot of diplomacy and a lot of politics, and you do have to understand how things work here and like in the real world and in reality, not just based on the things that we see, the connections we make, because often the connections we make are valid, but there's more to it. So I do want to start off by talking, fam, about just going over the end of the meeting between President Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. They had their major talks with Chinese delegations and Russian delegations discussing a wide range of topics. So they met behind closed doors first, and then with a number of top officials, including Sergei Lavrov and the chairman of the Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, and the defense minister, Sergei Shoigu. And this is all part of the negotiations between Russia and China. And then the meeting, of course, was followed by another round of talks, which had all these delegations, like I said. And so then they had these ties between the two nations that they really emphasized. And among them, they reached 14 total documents that were signed during this whole meeting. And according to Vladimir Putin and Xi, their relationship has reached the highest ever level right now. So we have a video, fam, that we can show. And this is the end. This is when this is from Russians with Attitude, where it was translated that she is saying in this video, change is coming that hasn't happened in 100 years, and we are driving this change together. And Putin says, I agree. And she says, please take care, dear friend. Putin says, have a safe journey. So obviously we won't understand it, but there it is. So that's him leaving there. And I think, Sam, did you miss one?
No, they got the G1 next. This one.
Okay. So during a meeting with um, Putin, Xi Jinping said that his country and Russia are guided by principles enshrined in the UN Charter, and they stand on the right side of history and praise bilateral ties between Moscow and Beijing. So this is some of what Xi said during this meeting.
乌克兰危机的
Chinese-Russian ties have gone far beyond bilateral relations over the last 10 years and are of crucial and vital importance for today's world order. Our relationship is built on contributing to the progress of mankind. We're guided by the principles in the UN Charter and adhere to an unbiased view. We're always ready for peace and dialogue. We firmly stand on the right side of history.
Western efforts to isolate and to contain Russia, both economically and politically, hit a wall today as the Chinese leader came out and said that not only was China happy about the record trade that it now enjoys with Russia at 190 billion turnover a year, it'll increase that trade to a much greater figure by 2030. That is the plan voiced by Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping of China. Both came out and lauded where relations are at now. They're at a historic height, they said, the best they've been in centuries. More than that, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping listed the various areas where they would work together, build on those relations, and they're pretty much everything. Their culture, their trade, business, financial services, as well as technology, energy, and much, much more. Both countries optimistic about the future. The Chinese also brought with them a plan for peace.
We believe that many of the points of China's peace plan are similar to our views and can be taken in action for the peaceful settlement when the West and Kiev are ready to accept these. However, so far, we see no willingness on their part.
Vladimir Putin also during the press conference told the audience, the various dignitaries, the delegations, as well as the press, that while he and Xi Jinping talked, Vladimir Putin was briefed that Great Britain, an official there, had announced that they would now supply depleted uranium rounds to the Ukrainian military, the same depleted uranium that has been linked to countless deaths and birth defects, cancer in areas such as Iraq, where it has been used.
The UK has announced not only the supply of tanks to Ukraine, but also shells with depleted uranium. It seems that the West has really decided to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian, not in words, but in reality. If all of this happens, Russia will have to react accordingly, based on the fact that the collective West is beginning to use weapons with a nuclear component.
All in all, grand, ambitious plans voiced by China and by Russia, the leaders of both saying that they stood for a multipolar world and that they would work to develop that world and the various systems and bodies that govern it. A world based on rules and laws in which China and Russia will remain good friends.
Okay, and so we'll talk more deeply about the depleted uranium because Vanessa is going to come on and she is from the UK and I want to hear her stance on it as well. But just going over what Murad said, some of the points were, I have like a summary as well. I put a summary if you guys want to see the little parts. We'll go over some of it. Fam on the Convo Couch. The Convo Couch posted little videos of different things Putin said, but here are some. Both presidents signed 14 documents on increased cooperation in fields ranging from trade and industry to science and the military, as well as technology. Like you said, Putin is open to negotiations, but clearly the West isn't. We saw Anthony Blinken recently speak out against it. We talked about this on Monday. And Vladimir Putin quoted from the I Ching, the Book of Changes, and said that the Russian and Chinese people have a common soul and can overcome any obstacle with their joint strength. Putin said that their relations between China and Russia were at their highest point in history, and that trade and economic cooperation were a priority. China's trade with Russia hit a record high in 2022, growing by 30% in spite of the embargo, in spite of the sanctions. And it's supposed to surpass 200 billion this year. 2/3 of it denominated in yuan and rubles, as both countries move away from the dollar. This is important, Pasta, and we sort of talked about it yesterday off the show. This is very big, and if Saudi Arabia, as you mentioned, begins to do that, then the U.S. economy is doomed. And this is, like you said. So they're also going to increase trade, further developing logistics and cross-border infrastructure, expanding agricultural cooperation, food security in both countries, exchanging minerals, energy minerals, chemical products, and technology. And then, of course, also the military aspect of this was very important. The military political alliances that developed during the Cold War are going to be different this time. This isn't going to be mimicking that. This is going to be, according to Putin, superior to that form of interstate cooperation, and are not of a confrontational nature, meaning that they're not going to be going at each other, and that even this meeting itself wasn't against any third party. That's what Z said. And according to regularly conduct joint maritime and air patrols and joint exercises, this is something the United States is going to see really negatively.
Yeah.
But this is something they're going to allude to, if they haven't already alluded to it. And I do want to hear, like, from the Western side, possibly, if you have any reactions from them. But this is just the beginning, when they were coming in and meeting. And, you know, we already had people say, oh, that looks like Mar-a-Lago. This is just, it's just, you know, that whole thing. But yeah, that's just one of the videos. We can go through some of them, but I want to hear your thoughts first.
Well, I'll leave that there in the background because there's not much going on. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, fam, we haven't gotten a lot of response from what the feelings are about this, because everybody was so damn focused. And I'm talking about all the networks, CNN, Fox, MSNBC. I sat down and watched it yesterday and the day before a little bit, and they're just so concentrated on the whole Trump arrest and the Trump arrest and going over that. And that is by design, right? You know, a lot of this information is coming out right now, so this stuff gets glossed over. This is something huge. And I would think the last one that you kind of pointed to more than anything would be the one that the United States is going to use to puff up their chest and say, look what they're doing. They're having joint exercises now, air patrols, sea patrols. We got to beef up our military, and we can't let them push us back. We have to let them know. I mean, you know, when Lindsey Graham and people like Pompeo and even Fareed Zakaria are calling for fucking war, for a balloon, you know, or now a drone in the Black Sea. Like, what the hell is it doing in the Black Sea anyways, is what something that Gerald Celente said. Oh, no, only America can have their stuff going wherever they want. I mean, we haven't got much response. I'm assuming we will get some response soon. I'm sure we'll get the twisting of it. I'll go peek over at the War Room. The other day, Steve Bannon called Elon Musk part of the CCP. So I'm sure that this meeting with Russia, you'll hear the word CCP. If every time you hear the word CCP, you get this. Did you hear that?
No, so low. I can barely hear it.
Can't even hear it.
I don't know.
Damn. I have it up all the way too, but I don't know. I'll figure that out. We'll figure it out as it goes along.
So, no, I mean, I agree. I mean, they're definitely they're already doing it. We have Nikki Haley in a minute. We're going to show her. But one of the other things I did want to show was Putin talking about the economy and the sanctions and how that really hasn't impacted. It's on the thread. The economy of Russia the way they wanted it to be impacted, right? And that's really important for people to really understand. And I think this idea that Russia's economy is just falling apart is just false. With the reality is actually the Western economy is the one that's falling apart. And ironically, of course, with this banking situation, Russia, because of the sanctions, has been pretty much kept out of it. So let's go ahead and
let me just say this much. This morning, on the morning show, it was like a 20-minute video, but we went through the whole thing. Those guys who used to play, who do the little pranks, kind of the ones who got George W. Bush on video, and they also got the European, the British Ministry of Defense, pretty much letting know whatchamacallit, Zelensky will have his back all the way. But yet we got to make it look different. And when these people talk in confidence to themselves, man, do they really let the cat out of the bag? They got Christine Lagarde, okay, who is the European Central Bank president, and they did a Zelensky impersonation, and boy, did they let the cat out of the bag. And they were like, well, what happened with Russia? How come it seems like it's backfired on Europe and not on Russia? And they're like, well, the Russian central banks, they did the right things. They raised inflation out of the gate, so they were ahead of it. And unfortunately, it didn't sack them, like it sacked Europe. And she was just letting the cat out of the bag of so many things. If you get a chance to go take a look at it, somebody mentioned in the chat, wow, I'll show the link later on and we'll get it out there. But holy cow, fam, economically, because China and Russia have their currencies pegged to commodities, to oil, to gold, to actual fiscal things that can be worth a value, they were able to actually thrive under these conditions because they hold a lot of the resources. So, we'll put this video on right now, but Jesus Christmas, fam. I think the cat is out of the bag. It is completely backfired on Europe right now. In that joke, the Zelensky impression, he goes, I guess the new currency is going to be like firewood. And they're like, what do you mean? To keep things warm.
And you sent the link to our guest, right? Okay.
Несмотря на последствия пандемии и санкционный прессинг, товарооборот в 2022 году...
Despite the consequences of the pandemic and sanctions pressure, trade in 2022 reached a historic record of $185 billion. It's expected this year Russia and China will not only reach the $200 billion trade volume that we agreed with our friends several years ago, but will also exceed this milestone. So it's not, the sanctions aren't turning out the way the West wanted, right? And they also talked about how Russia and China are I think it's done, fam. They also talked about how Russia and China are trading. Basically, China is Russia's biggest market. They sell liquefied gas, natural gas, oil, coal to China, right? And China is benefiting from this as well because it's cheaper for them. And now it's kind of like a win-win situation. And he talked about replacing the Western markets with China. And then also Putin discussed the Siberia 2 gas pipeline. And the Siberia 2 gas pipeline, guys, through Mongolia, it's almost all parameters for it have been agreed. So they broke that down as well. And this is, if you just want to go on RT.com and go to this link here, basically everything I'm talking about is laid out. I'm not going to go over it again. It's the same thing that I'm talking about, but just so you guys know, basically everything that I talked about is on there. But the Siberia 2 gas pipeline is something that the West is really not happy about. It's literally going to pretty much create another avenue for energy exchange between the East and Russia. And it's not going to be good for the West at all whatsoever. So that's another thing. And then the Russian exports to the Chinese market have reached $7 billion. Okay. And so this is, again, another RT article. Why is China so important to the Russian economy? If you just scroll down, fam, I'll just highlight real quick a couple of the bold parts. The trade, they've been having record trade. Again, the trade almost reached, I believe, 200 billion turnover by 2024 is going to be reached this year alone. The energy cooperation that we've already talked about, the exchange of liquefied natural gas, coal, oil, the replacing of the European market with the Chinese market, the yuanization of Russian settlements. So just trading within these currencies at itself, and also trying to de-dollarize and find new solutions away from the Western dollar, the Western currencies, and also particularly cooperating with Latin America as well, that is seeking to do that. Like I said, China is filling the Western void, the Russian exports growth. So all of these in more detail, if you go to RT.com, you will find the that aspect. And of course, like I said, the joint projects and the Siberian pipeline. So yeah, just a little bit of a rundown there. Basically, everything centered around economy, trade, and some about the Ukraine situation. So again, it's on the Convo Couch if you want to watch the snippets. And by the way, just to throw this out there, Xi Jinping has been denying Joe Biden a phone call for days. The conversation between Biden and Xi will take place at an appropriate time. But for now, the leader remains busy, said John Kirby, the White House Strategic Communications Coordinator. So, yeah, he's busy, is what he said to Joe Biden. So it kind of shows you where the situation is right now. But yeah, fam. How about we get we listen to this and then we go straight to our guest that's in the waiting room. So we're gonna play this video. This is Nikki Haley, and this is Nikki Haley who said a win for Russia is a win for China. Okay, so let's hear what she says here.
How do you see it, China's role in Russia and what they're doing now?
This goes back to the debate that, we have to talk about this in a way that we understand that there is nothing China would love more than to see Russia win this war on Ukraine, because a win for Russia is a win for China. These are two countries that have named and two dictators that have said they are unlimited partners. We need to remember that. They chose those words carefully. You look at the images today. That was very intentional. This is the new axis of evil, with Iran being their junior partner. What we have to do is stay focused. We have to have the backs of Ukraine. That doesn't mean we have money or troops, but we have to finish this because China does not want that. And what we have to make sure of is when Ukraine wins this war against Russia, that will send a message with China that wants to take Taiwan. It'll send a message to North Korea. It'll send a message to Iran. We have to finish this. This is not a territorial dispute. This is a fight for freedom, and it's one that we have to win.
Okay.
Damn, I wish my soundboard was working. Holy shit. Are you fucking kidding me? I don't mean to curse, but we just got psycho fucking pass running this place.
She's
this is
running
a fight
for
for
president.
democracy, fam.
She's running for president in the Republican Party. And a lot of people think the Republicans are less hawkish because they've been less hawkish on Ukraine. But you throw China in there and they'll be equally as hawkish, if not more. So you have, you have the war party. That's the party that exists in the U.S. So with that, fam, let's bring in our guest.
Yes, let's bring in our
Vanessa
guest
Beeley.
who is not part of the new axis of evil, but Iran is a minor partner, but we don't know where Syria is on this whole thing. Ladies and gentlemen, from Syria, the actual Syria, not Syria somewhere in the United States or from a desk like Clapper or Brennan, Vanessa Beeley's here.
Hi.
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 Oh, we had to welcome you in with one of our war criminals because I do have some questions to ask you because of what the UK has been doing. And you're the UK's best friend. They really love you over there, the BBC especially. So, what are your thoughts on this? Because you've been paying attention, I'm sure, to what the meeting between Xi and Putin. What did you think of that in terms of what Nikki Haley has said? And she's, by the way, running for president as well. So,
well, I mean, it's kind of amazing to me what's going on at the moment. We're actually seeing the world running on two tracks. And it's like, for me, the US and the UK, because I see them as the kind of the leaders of this entire globalist cartel, which is so Western centric, in my opinion. We'll come on to this later. We see them like literally clinging to this raft of propaganda, which is sinking underneath them and kind of crumbling and falling to pieces and being chipped away at by the truth, effectively. Like they're being, even the fact that they have the goal to try and revise the history of the Iraq conflict on the anniversary of the Iraq conflict. I mean, everyone is just, I think, jaw-droppingly shocked that it's become so visible. You know, their criminality, their absolute desire for supremacy at the expense of pretty much any nation that challenges that supremacy, that unipolar paradigm that they want to exist in. But I think a year ago, we wouldn't have seen this level of defiance of that Western cabal. We wouldn't have seen it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what we're seeing now is literally an entire other axis forming and strengthening and taking absolutely no notice of the West, actually. You know, and the thing is that from an economic perspective, from a trade perspective, from a visionary perspective, from a military perspective, this axis is now so strong. Right. I mean, I was just reading something from Alex Craner about the Russian hypersonic missiles and the fact that they are streets ahead. There's no other country that is producing those missiles. Okay, I know the anti-war crowd are going to be going, see, she supports war. No, what I'm saying is you can't have global security with a hegemon like the US cabal unless you can, it's like the bully in the schoolyard.
Right.
Unless you break the nose of the bully in the schoolyard, he isn't going to stop bullying, right?
Exactly.
And developing this technology. I mean, I remember when the world was up in arms about DPRK having nuclear power, nuclear weapons, etc. And Putin basically made the comment, he said, look, anyone has the right to defend themselves against those that violate international law. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying now is those countries like Syria, like Venezuela, like Cuba, all of whom, by the way, are coming out in support of this new axis. I mean, quite incredible phone calls from Cuba, Evo Morales basically coming out in support of Putin over the ICC, a warrant for his arrest, etc. You know, what we're seeing and what people that are kind of still peeping on about anti-war are not seeing is the empowerment of countries that have been under the jackboot of imperialism for decades, who are now actually, and I include Syria in that. Look at Syria go right now. You know, my heart, like when I see Syrian Airlines plane landing on UAE soil, literally I was in tears. I'm struggling now because after 12 years of war, after 75 years of CIA and MI6 interference in their sovereign affairs, it's just freaking unbelievable to see President Assad and Asma al-Assad arriving in UAE, which is the hornet's nest of British and American intelligence. You have groups like Analysis Research Knowledge, for whom James LeMessurier was working when he set up the White Helmets in Syria. You have Good Harbor International, Richard Clarke, Bush's terrorist czar, who to a large extent took the fall for Bush, right? And you've got all of this, these mercenary organizations like, oh God, the name's Eric Prince, Blackwater, sorry, it then changed and became Academy and then something else.
They change it all the time, yeah.
Yeah. But you've got all these organizations, right, based in UAE, and I checked because I was like, seriously? And I was told in no uncertain terms that UAE decided to operate outside the sphere of US-UK influence because, in a sense, it's supporting pan-Arabism. Pan-Arabism is like the anathema for the West. The unification of Arab states. Are you crazy? But here's the UAE that's completely occupied by US, UK, working with Israel against Yemen, welcoming President Assad and Asma al-Assad. I mean, it's like the 12 years never existed. We're back to the Vogue articles about Asma al-Assad. I don't know. I mean, I just, it's difficult these days to allow hope to flourish, but just for those 5 minutes of seeing them get off the plane on the UAE runway was, and for people to understand, President Assad isn't going cap in hand. When he had the actual televised meeting with, oh God, his name's just escaped me. Anyway, with the leader of the UAE, basically the conversation was quite subtle, and someone explained on my YouTube channel that they had kind of mistranslated it, probably in an attempt to smooth it down, because actually what Assad was saying was, my father had a great relationship with your father. Let's see if the family relations can continue. So in other words, he was kind of in front of this guy. He was having a dig, right? It was very subtle, but in Arabic circles, this is kind of how it's done. It's never direct. It's always said very subtly. And the response was very much no. Syria is welcome back into the family. So that was actually a really important message, and one that the West barely reported on this, by the way. I was looking for articles on the BBC, and I think there was a minor one in the Independent. That was it. Incredible. So I don't know.
Hafsa, you're muted.
Because all the news cycles are focused on Donald Trump getting arrested and getting distracted on this thing. And there he is, UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, maybe help me say it right, Nahyan, greeted Assad and his wife, Asma, in the capital, Abu Dhabi. And this is, you use the term pan-Arabism. Can you give us a little insight to what that exactly means? And by the way, when we refer to those anti-war people, you can do air quotes, because then we'll know that those are those privileged American people who have this anti-war perspective and don't even, understand what's going out there. And even some of my libertarian friends that piss the shit out of me off when they say, oh yeah, I believe in the Second Amendment to defend yourself. And I'm like, hello, do you know that the Donbass sits on the border of Russia? So please tell us what pan-Arabism is, because I've talked about it before. And the thing that's really just driving me crazy, though, Vanessa, and if you can piggyback on it as well, you talk about the negligence and them not reporting on this. And I've just mentioned the fact that they're talking everything Donald Trump with this BS Snorri Daniels, let's revisit it, try to arrest him thing. And I think it's a ploy to keep people distracted from what's going on. But when they do talk about these things, it seems like the propaganda is driving the narrative in the media. And that's what a lot of people in the States who don't know what's going on outside their borders keep repeating.
Well, I mean, pan-Arabism really simply is the unification of all Arab states into a sort of union. I mean, this was the vision of Gamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt and the father of Bashar al-Assad, Hafiz al-Assad. And then, of course, the West basically stuck its oar in and started wars and divisions and so on, because the last thing it wants the last thing it wants in our own populations is unity, right? So we have the right-left divide, the red-brown, all these kind of tactics they use to prevent us from actually talking to each other and finding common ground, right? All these movements, the LBGT movement, all of this are distractions. Sorry, but they are distractions. They're not important right now. All of that can be sorted out once we actually stop the drive to world war. And that is where I'm anti-war, right? Of course, nobody in their right mind wants war. But people in their right mind, living in countries that are under attack, understand the need for self-defense, for defense of that sovereign nation, for defense of the people of that nation. And as I've just said, you know, the fact that this entire new axis is really reinforcing itself and strengthening right now on every single level is terrifying to the West. And what do we see from the West? We just see a kind of default position of aggression and lying and revisionism, reductionism, propaganda. It's just like a repeat cycle. It's like they can't deal with reality. It's like Israel, you know, what is its response? War, let's have war. You know, if we have war, we can stop the civil war within our own country. We can distract our people from the actual discontent with the fact that Israel is rapidly becoming a parody of the kind of only democracy in the Middle East, because it's eroding what little democracy it actually has. It's publicly executing what remains of the Palestinian resistance in places like Nablus and Jenin. It's gone so far right in such a kind of warp speed amount of time that even Israelis are starting to come out on the streets and say, no, like, hold on, you know, we don't want this. And if Israel starts war with, for example, Lebanon or Syria, and actually they're pretty indivisible. I mean, Kevork did a really good video about the fact if they start war anywhere, and it's highly likely that they're going to, it will be with Lebanon. Well, if it's with Lebanon, it's with the entire army of Hezbollah. And if it engages with Hezbollah, it will engage with Yemen, it will engage with Syria, you know, potentially other countries in the region that are now being empowered. You know, this image of President Assad, both the state visit to Moscow and then the state visit to the UAE, what does this do? It sends an incredibly strong message to countries in the region that have either been occupied for more than 30 years, like Iraq, 20 years Afghanistan, even Jordan is starting to kind of, you know, oh, hold on, let's not get left behind, right?
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. It's a domino effect. And you know, the meeting between Putin and Xi Jinping, the same thing. I mean, when you read the 12-point peace deal that China is putting forward for Ukraine, it's so eminently logical, and it's everything that the West should have been doing, right? And this is what keeps happening. I don't care if you like Putin. I don't care if you like China. I really don't care. Just look at what they're saying.
Yeah.
Right? You can't disagree with it.
I think the problem these people get stuck in, well, Russia's bad, China's bad, and they don't listen to anything that is being said, the dialogue, the diplomacy, the level of respect that we don't see between our own Congress people themselves in the United States, or even in the EU and the UK. But when you have the treatment, the diplomacy, I wish for the world to treat each other like that. That might seem utopian at this point, but like that's what we ultimately want. And shifting to Fam, if you can get that video of Putin or that tweet, I want to replay that because I want Vanessa's opinion, because so many people are going to say this, Vanessa. Oh my God, Putin wants to go to war with the U.S. and the collective of NATO because the UK wants to send depleted uranium to Ukraine. So Putin said Russia's going to respond accordingly. How dare Putin say that at that threat, right? And we can go through. I know you know how uranium has been used before and what it does and the side effects of that. So I want to hear what Putin says, Fam, and then we can get Vanessa's point on that as well. Yeah.
Известно, что
You're muted. There you go.
I'm gonna play it low if you can read the words because it's not translated.
Yeah. Oh, it is. Okay, got it. Yes. So today it became known that the United Kingdom, through the deputy head of the Ministry of Defense of this country, announced not only the supply of tanks to Ukraine, but also shells with depleted uranium. It seems that the West really decided to fight against Russia to the last Ukrainian, not in words, but in deeds. But in this regard, I would like to note that if all this happens, then Russia will be forced to react accordingly. Bearing in mind that the collective West is already starting to use weapons with a nuclear component. So, Vanessa, when people say, how dare Putin make a statement like that? He is escalating this conflict because, fam, it's good. He's escalating this conflict because he is saying he's going to respond, and obviously the response will be an appropriate response, right?
Yeah.
What do you say to that? I mean, who's instigating here? Who's doing these things?
Well, I mean, come on. I mean, what the hell is the West doing, actually? I mean, they've already kind of pushed us to the brink of a nuclear conflict to some degree. They've been by proxy targeting the Zaporozhye nuclear plant. And that's actually part of the China peace deal, is that all nuclear plants must be protected and must not come under fire from, it's a very comprehensive peace deal and effectively based on international law. I mean, I know there's kind of adherence to the UN and the UN Charter and the, all of that is, it would be kind of nice to see them writing a whole new charter, for example, but I guess it's step by step. If as I said, if you'd asked me a year ago, would we be seeing these kind of meetings and would we be seeing Putin sitting next to Xi Jinping and making this kind of statement publicly, I would have been a little hesitant to say yes. So, the speed at which things are developing now suggests to me that okay, they're basing their arguments on the existing international law sort of rules that we have. But, I'm certainly getting the impression that they're looking at creating an entire new order by which we will all exist globally, where no country has the right to interfere in the sovereign affairs of another. And I can hear all the people also, yeah, but Russia invaded, etc. But okay.
Yeah.
We'll go back to that, But coming back to this depleted uranium, I mean, for one thing, okay, let's look at the 2015 use, which is the only admitted use of depleted uranium in Syria. I know from speaking to colleagues or friends in the Syrian Arab Army that depleted uranium was being used, depleted DU bullets, for example, were being used in the battles around Aleppo. And, members of the Syrian Arab Army are now still suffering the after effects from that. And we know from Iraq that the birth defects, et cetera, go on for generations. Now, the bombing of the so-called ISIS convoys in 2015, despite the fact that we know the US and ISIS are basically allies, and ISIS is a proxy of the United States war effort and the UK in Syria. Why did they have to use DU? They could have taken out oil tankers with just about any missile. Now, their argument is, well, this means that the vehicles can't be used again. No, what it actually means is when that scrap metal is traded, the people that are trading it are going to pick up the residue of the DU from the metal that they're transporting from Syria to wherever they take it. And it means who's going to clear up the residue? That residue is still there. The US isn't going to clear it up. Of course it isn't. You know, so Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, you know, wherever the US go, Yugoslavia, actually, as far as I know also. So wherever the US has gone, it's used depleted uranium. And I say the US, but I generally mean the UK and the US as a sort of collaborative criminal entity. So what is, you know, what Putin's supposed to say? Oh yeah, great, like bring on the depleted uranium and let's just wait for it to be, I mean, you know, this is, it's, the fact is you've got China putting together a peace deal, right? And this is very similar to the Russian role in Syria. Russia played a peacemaking role in Syria when areas were liberated. Russia was in charge of the amnesty and reconciliation deals. Why? Because it was considered a neutral entity, both by Damascus and by the armed groups, right? So China is doing no different. China is coming in with a very balanced view. It's coming in clearly now favoring Russia, right? That's apparent from the meetings. And I also have to say, I've never heard the kind of language that's being used by these countries when they're discussing together. Friendship, trust. President Assad even used the word devotion, family. You know, like the West doesn't even use this language with each other.
No. No.
You know, it's kind of, and if they do use it, it's so hypocritical.
Yeah.
You know?
I want to play this video because you shared this tweet too as well. We covered this the other day, but I want to get your opinions on this because this drives me crazy. But then when you retweeted it, you also brought out a very interesting point. I have it scrolling down on the bottom. The U.S. claims that a ceasefire in Ukraine will only give Putin time to regroup his military forces. However, the U.S., what you have said, has used phony ceasefires to allow their radical proxies to regroup in Syria. Let's take a look at handsome man John Kirby, and we'll go get your opinions right after.
That if coming out of this meeting, there's some sort of call for a ceasefire, well, that's just going to be unacceptable because all that's going to do, Mike, is ratify Russia's conquest to date. All that's going to do is give Mr. Putin more time to refit, retrain, reman, and try to plan for renewed offensives at a time of his choosing. We hope, and we've said this before, that President Xi will call and talk to President Zelensky because we believe the Chinese need to get the Ukrainian perspective here. That if
I want to leave his face right there, like look at it right there, but please,
honestly,
like,
he should stop dyeing his hair.
give us your opinions on that. Oh, what you see there, and I mean, I just blown away. Like we're just shaking our head, like they won't allow a cease friggin' fire at this point, and they come right out and say it.
Yeah, and I mean, he's not the only one saying it, is he?
No.
You know, it's quite extraordinary. I mean, as I pointed out, it just occurred to me that this is exactly what they did in Syria, in particular in Aleppo. They consistently called for UN-brokered ceasefires, which were effectively to allow al-Qaeda-dominated armed groups to regroup, re-equip, rearm with weapons sent in by the US via Turkey into the armed group enclaves in East Aleppo at that time. So, you know, this is sheer projection from Kirby. It's like just assuming that Russia doesn't want peace. Russia is just going to regroup, rearm, and then take more Ukrainian territory. You know, Russia has always been perfectly clear about what it wants to achieve in Ukraine. And for Russia, all it really wants is a neutral buffer zone between the Donbass and whatever's left of Ukraine after Romania's taken a bit, Poland's taken a bit. I mean, you know, this is another thing, what's going on now. The West has effectively admitted that the war in Ukraine is lost because it's now basically turning its attention to Poland and like telling Poland that it's going to have to start fighting Russia. I mean, it's just seriously, the West has gone mad. It really has gone mad. And the more sober and sensible and rational and logical the East is, the more it basically throws a mirror at the West, and they're becoming more and more demented. I mean, it really is kind of one flew over the cuckoo's nest time at the moment.
Yeah. So in spite of all of this, of exactly what you say, the West is becoming extremely demented, that they seem to be just getting extremely angry and like trying to grab onto any sort of power that they have left because they see the power dwindling. I mean, the US economy is doing terrible. There's massive protests in France. There's massive protests everywhere. The EU is falling apart. And of course, meanwhile, you have China, you have Russia, you have what's going on in Syria, what the UAE is doing. You have the rise of Pan-Africanism as well, and then you have Latin America saying, "Oh yeah, we're gonna do deals with China and etc." So this whole situation is happening. Like these nations, as you said, were under the bootstrap of the West, are now finding this opportunity that now somebody stood up to the bully, and now they're like, yeah, let's go, let's all jump onto this thing. And it's like, it's, to me, it's glorious to see in spite of the darkness that we're living through, I think. But you still have people that think, in spite of all of this, that Russia is a part, in China, but let's focus on Russia for now, that both of these countries are part of this new world order globalist agenda, that everything they're doing, that everything Xi Jinping and Putin are doing is theater, because they're still going to take us down that same path of technological slavery, right? Where with the CBDCs and with everything, people are saying, look, Russia was terrible at COVID, Russia did this, Russia did that. And I've been saying my experience here and what it was, and others have been saying what they experienced here in Russia versus what was going on in the West. But aside from that, Vanessa, why do you think that Russia is not this just, it's not going along with this sort of Klaus Schwabian situation, that he's not just part of another room at the table of this? And I'm not trying to diminish the fact that these globalists exist and they are trying to take control of the world, because that's exactly what's going on. That's what we're seeing. But I just don't think Russia or China, and in my experience, I can mostly speak for Russia, are going along with this sort of idea to become like the West. And I don't necessarily think technology is going to be stopped either. So it's these multiple questions I have are like, well, why do you think Russia is independent of this whole agenda, and why do you think they're fighting back? And do you think this whole push towards technology, because in their speech they did say that China and Russia were going to work on technological sectors and even AI. So that's what's going to scare a lot of these people, right? Oh my God, they're still going that route. What's your opinion on all of that?
Look, I mean, we've said this before. I mean, technology is going to advance. You're not going to stop that. Also, in all honesty, we're not going to stop what is going on in the world right now. Is Putin a good guy or a bad guy? For me, actually, I look at what he's saying, just as I look at what Xi Jinping said. I look at what President Assad is saying. I look at what many of these leaders, Evo Morales, Maduro, they're all kind of saying the same thing, right? And it's a totally different language to the West, with a totally different intention behind it, in my view. Because although they're using words like sustainability, and I know people jump on and say, yeah, but look, they're using the same terminology as Schwab, as WEF, and Davos, and so on. The end result is very different. Now, I can say that categorically from my position in Syria, because, like, for example, I know that one of the main reasons that President Assad went to Moscow was for President Putin to persuade him to have the meeting with President Erdogan of Turkey to kind of bring an end to the animosity between Turkey and Syria. Because for Russia and Iran, this would be, okay, that's one situation they don't have to worry about anymore, effectively, right? Now, I also know that President Assad categorically stated, I will not meet with President Erdogan. I will not give him the PR or the media coverage before elections unless he guarantees the following: to withdraw entirely from Syrian territory, to stop supporting the armed groups that are effectively occupying Syrian territory and attacking Syrian Arab Army and civilians, and to return the status of Syrian territory to what it was pre-2011. And unless he has those guarantees, he's not going to meet with President Erdogan. And Russia and Iran and even China, to some extent, have to respect the sovereign decisions of the Damascus government. Now, this is not how the West operates. It isn't. You know, if an ally or the leadership of an ally state dared to countermand what the US wanted to achieve regionally, they'd be assassinated, they'd be removed, something would happen to get rid of them. And this isn't the first time that this has happened. This has happened on a number of occasions, often to the frustration of Russia, right? But this is the difference. Russia will step back and say, okay, this is, we don't interfere in the sovereign affairs of Syria. And so for me, already we have a massive difference between how Russia and China deal with their allies and how the West deals with them. So, and we have your experience, Eva Bartlett's experience of living in Russia, which, as you said, is not the kind of fear-based governance state that these people kind of portray it or convey it as being. And there's also this question of, look, nobody can know what's going to happen in the future. I'm like you at the moment. I'm just feeling like, for the first time, I actually feel hope that countries like Syria, like Latin America, Africa, all these countries that have just been absolutely devastatingly pillaged and raped and plundered for decades, might actually get a look in at their own resources, at their own economy, at their own ability to trade. We go back to 2004 in President Assad's 5Cs project, where he effectively wanted to make Syria the hub of natural gas, oil trade between the South, the East, Europe, and so on. And of course, that's complete nemesis to the United States. Oh my God, we can't have an independent nation in the Middle East that's also promoting pan-Arabism, that also has the socialist ideology behind the governance. Right? They're independent from the central banking. Like, they support Palestine. No, we can't have all this, But what did Russia do in 2005 in order to support the 5Cs project? It wrote off 75% of the debt that Syria owed Russia. People don't know a lot of this stuff. What has China done to support Syria through the war? It's effectively not called in its debts, right? So it's, I'm looking at it from the perspective of the countries that have been persecuted for years. I'm not looking at it from a privileged Western perspective. And also the other point that I want to make, even if, like, for example, in Syria, the vaccine uptake was less than 6%. 6% was the official number, so it was a lot less, right? you're never going to get the Syrian people to accept something they disagree with. Never. You're never going to get Africa. I mean, look at the riots now going on in Africa, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the West, particularly in the UK and even in the US, there's a level of apathy that you don't see in countries that have been struggling to survive for decades. And I'm not belittling the real suffering in the US and in the UK, but we're only really seeing the hardcore riots in France. And we've been seeing those since 2018-19, right? So, people are underestimating the power of the people in these nations to say no to something they don't want.
So
China, I can't speak for, because China is a bit of a kind of an unknown entity for me. I'll admit that. I'm encouraged by the meeting between Xi Jinping and Putin. It was way more than I expected it to be, actually.
Yeah. I think that they have just like a sophomoric view of Syria. They got the same type of view of China. China has a huge banking industry, and when there's any connections to, like, for instance, the whole Hunter Biden situation, and they're like, well, China paid him off. I'm like, no, that was a bank and it was an energy company, and then we get this back and forth, and now the left is now saying the Truth Social Donald Trump, right? He took a money from 2 million from this guy and 6 million from this guy, and they're both close to Vladimir Putin. I mean, it's just like, are you guys fucking naive? Like, they have bankings, they have their own banking system over there. They have more private companies in China than they do in small businesses in China than they do in the United States, by far. I mean, it's ridiculous. But I do want to ask you this one, because you did put this up from our good friend Patrick Henningsen, who, fam, thank God we're okay on the Convo Couch YouTube, but the AM Wake Up YouTube put up a video of Patrick Henningsen talking about the COVID and whatnot. We got labeled medical misinformation and got a strike, but he put this up the other day, and you tweeted this. Will Poland troops, will they fill the void in Ukraine when Zelensky runs out of troops to throw into the meat grinder? What are your thoughts on this? Because they are amassing an army of 300,000 and intends to fight Russia in 2024 in event of the defeat of the armed forces in Ukraine, which I think we are just weeks away from Bakhmut being taken. Do you really think that Russia will commit to the game? I know they sent some four fighter jets over there, but do you think they'll go all in and sending troops in there?
I think it's very possible, the more desperate and demented that they become. But I think, as I said earlier, what this is an admission that they have lost the war in Ukraine. Because why else would they be pushing the start of a new war with Poland? I mean, Poland has, according to Russian reports, already sent, I think it's around 5,000 troops into Ukraine to fight alongside the Azov and Aidar and various other Ukrainian armed forces. So Poland is already in Ukraine fighting against Russia. So, but in order for, I mean, this would mean, if I'm correct, that Russia would take all of Ukraine and then march on into Poland, which Russia has never said that it has any intention of doing this. So, or it would be, it could potentially be a long-range war, or Poland sends those however many troops, which I would be extremely skeptical of those numbers in a country the size of Poland, but could be wrong.
Yeah.
Sending those troops into Ukraine. So Ukraine remains the battlefield. I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult to kind of make sense out of these really like insane statements that are coming out, both in Western media and from Western officials. I mean, you tweeted out the Bovan and Lexus conversation with Christine Lagarde. I mean, I only got halfway through it before I came on, but
isn't it crazy? Is that not crazy? It blows my, she laid all the chips on the table. I'm like, oh my God, They even went into central bank digital currencies and all these other things about, Europe. And she even said, she goes, well, we're going to hopefully that, we'll be watching and monitoring when it's up to $1,000. Maybe when it's around 300, we'll leave it be. But that's very, very dangerous, kind of signaling that they want to track and trace every single dollar that the Europeans spend. It's like, and she just said this. I was like, this is just mind blowing. She talked about Russia, like, oh, well, Russia raised the interest rates right away. They knew what they were doing, so they didn't devalue their currency. And he's like, really? Is that what it's all about? I mean, and she even said that inflation, they might raise the interest rates. And she was saying low end 7%. I'm like, whoa, that means all the working class are never going to be able to get a loan for a car, never get a mortgage for their house. They can't even get repairs done in their house. They're going to be completely cut off and stranglehold. And they're pretty much openly admitting this stuff.
Exactly. And she talks about the like, how dare they sell their resources to the East? How dare they? I mean, I was just cracking up. Well, what do you expect them to do? If you cut off their supply lines, if you sanction them, if they're too big to do this to. This isn't Syria or Iraq or Libya or Venezuela or even Cuba. This is Russia. It's kind of, I don't know. You see, I sort of struggle. I know you're right. There are connections. Of course, you can always make connections. But the thing is, and actually Tessalina actually wrote a really good piece a couple of days ago, and she actually made the point. She said, if you're a decent human being and you get into these power-based zones, right, which governance is going to be, how do you deal with it? And it's a really good question, because when you look at what Russia and China are achieving, and yeah, of course, they're still shaking hands. They're still on the diplomatic circuit. They're still doing what is required of them as politicians and diplomats. Is there corruption within the Russian government? Is there corruption in every world government? Yes. Of course. Nobody is denying that it's possible there are infiltrators, there are globalists, even within the governments of Russia and China, or with influence within the governments of Russia and China. Ultimately, are they going to achieve what they want and basically all end up on the same page as Western globalists? I'm not convinced. I'm just not convinced by this.
Yeah, I'm not convinced either, especially because when I look at how Russia is right now, it's very the bureaucratically Soviet based. Like, it's just very much far away from that sort of embrace of technology. And like, there are certain things that they have, or wristbands to open a locker at a gym, but that's not connected to anything other than like a little thing to make sure you're locking your locker. It's not just, it doesn't mean it's bad. I feel like people have come from this idea that everything in technology is bad, and it's like, well, okay, but then we don't have a choice other than to really wish for the apocalypse and no technology exists. We go back to an agrarian society, or what is the other option? We have a better system with better people in it, because I think technology is going to advance anyway. Exactly. And that's the thing. I don't necessarily love this idea of AI and stuff, but there are people who view it differently. There was a Chinese, I think, commentator on Twitter that was saying how in China they do use a lot of like machines to do simple work, but other people find jobs in higher fields, meaning they're now it's open for them to find jobs in fields that require more education, open for them to have more education, opening for them to have another type of thing. That I think that's different than if the like evil globalists take over and they literally put you on a stranglehold, like Pasta was saying, where you can't own anything, you can't buy anything, you can't educate yourself, you have to do what you're told. I think people are confusing this techno-fascism that is very much what the West is pushing with the antithesis of that, which is like, well, we want to better the lives of people, so we have to keep up. Like China, and especially China more than even Russia, but they have to keep up with the United States. Like if you can't expect these countries to oppose the Western hegemon without keeping up with their technology. That would be self-suicide. I don't understand how these people think that, oh yes, we should all have no nuclear weapons. Yes, we should all have no nuclear weapons, but the United States has nuclear weapons and they've used them before. Do you expect these countries to just say, okay, well, we'll give them up and you'll give up too, right? Pinky swear promise? Yeah? No. Like it's ridiculous to think, to have this idea that it's just gonna happen that way.
Gaddafi gave him up and look what happened, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and Gaddafi, of course, was also going to push for this Pan-African idea. And so again, this whole idea that these countries should just not defend themselves or prepare themselves to face this global tyrant, which is the collective of NATO led by the US, is ridiculous. And I think we are seeing two opposing sides, one based on cooperation and just respect, like you were talking about Syria, because that's the thing, you know, Russia, China, and Syria don't have to agree on everything, but they can agree to disagree and respect the relationships built. And the United States does not do that, and they have never done that, at least not for forever. And so that's to me is the big difference that you pointed out, Vanessa.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, I was just reading through the press conference and the press statements and the article that Putin wrote before Xi Jinping arrived. And, you know, they're talking about agricultural development projects, not kind of along the lines of, as you said, the WEF and so on. But no, they're talking about basically providing sustainable food supplies globally into the future, you know. And I mean, you live in Russia. Even when I was there for that relatively short time, the amount of building that was going on, the encouragement for people to buy land and to build, the loans that are available for people to have their own homes, to buy a car, to do all of this goes completely in the opposite direction to where the WF is going. Right, in my opinion. The reality on the ground is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, look at a country like Syria. If ultimately it wants to get back to a situation where it's kind of close to a level playing field with the big guys, it's also going to have to go down the technology route. It's also going to have to develop even AI, all this stuff, because if it doesn't, it just remains in this third world kind of chamber where it can be exploited and where it can be misused, abused, etc. Right? I mean, it's exactly what you said. The thing is, when something is being used or misused, it doesn't necessarily mean that those that are developing in order to, again, defend themselves, protect themselves in the future, or to ensure their survival are going to misuse it or abuse it in the same way. I'm not saying they're not going to, but I'm also saying we need to entertain the idea that they will be using it more constructively, more positively for not only their populations, but also globally. You know, even it's the thing is, it's become so rare for us to hear countries genuinely talking about respecting sovereignty, about not interfering in the sovereign affairs. Look at the deal that China brokered between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Now, again, if I'm looking at this positively, it has potential to end the war in Yemen.
Yeah.
You know, it has potential. At the moment, it's very difficult to see which way it's going to go, because for sure Saudi Arabia is interfering in the sovereign affairs of Yemen, right? As is Iran. And I noticed that the Zionist media were putting out headlines like, oh, Iran has promised to stop supplying weapons to Ansarullah in Yemen. And Said Morandi in Iran said, this is rubbish. Of course, we're not going to do that. While Saudi Arabia is effectively bombing the hell out of Yemen, blockading it, besieging it, preventing people having medical care, etc. Right? UAE is involved, Israel is involved, and so on. So it's a very kind of far off hope. But again, as I said, who would have ever expected Iran and Saudi Arabia to come to the table and have a deal brokered between them by China?
Yeah,
it's unheard of. I mean,
well,
I'm being told here that even here, Saudi Arabia are going to open at least a section of their embassy.
Yeah.
So we're seeing huge change at the moment, and a lot of it is, I think, because these countries are looking at the West and going, shit, they're so unstable. Like, we need to get ourselves somewhere where there is going to be economic trade stability for the future.
Oh, I'm very interested to see what that relationship would do for the Syrian people as far as them coming together. We obviously know the effects it could have in Yemen, and that's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, so many things are just happening right now. It's amazing, and it's happening under a really unfriendly government in the United States that doesn't want to see this happening. I don't know if you know this, but almost immediately after Iran and Saudi Arabia brokered that deal by China, people in Congress started going, let's start looking at Saudi Arabia for their human rights violations in Yemen. Like, oh, now you want to fucking look at them? It's like, please, thank you, Captain Obvious. But, that was the United States has been supplying them. So I think the Democrats will just try to blame Trump or whatever what happens and say it was Trump supplying them. But we know for quite some time, Obama, everybody going back, Clinton, Bush's, they've been supplying the kingdom with weapons for quite some time. And the big thing is now if this deal goes through and Saudi Arabia agrees to start selling oil in yuan, what's going to happen to the American dollar? That's the only thing that's really propping up the American dollar is the petrodollar, because, the kingdom has agreed to sell oil only in American dollars and the petrodollar. They're doing it for 40 years. And we've been trying to print our way out of these problems, which we know is not going to happen. It's you can't do that. Inflation is real. The more you print, the more you devalue your currency. But if that is gone, holy cow! I hope you have your money diversified. Don't have it all in American dollars. Maybe now is a good time to buy some property and get some Bitcoin. Not giving financial advice, just saying that the Iran-Saudi Arabia thing is a big deal. And nobody's talking about it in the States because they're going, Trump might be arrested.
I mean, all these incredible things are kind of going on, and no one's really even that aware of it. It's quite bizarre. Like you said, they're on overdrive with the distraction techniques. God bless Trump for them.
Vanessa, let everybody know where they can find you. And I know. Thank you for putting that picture up with Trump and the American flag and the lion.
Good.
You got a girl who's a whistleblower, right? We have a whistleblower who's saying, "Oh my God, look what's going on. This was for murder for profit scam in the United States with the COVID situation, and it all came out of the CARES Act." The CARES Act didn't say specifically how they got money. Instead, they kicked that money to HHS, and HHS decided how it was done. But Donald Trump signed that bill. So as you're saying there's a murder for profit situation going on, you're going, vote for Trump. I don't get it, but maybe that's why they kind of faked that he was going to get arrested, because it victimizes him, and that's that. But let everybody know where we can find you. Vanessa Beeley, regular on the Convo Couch, AM Wake Up, on Newsday, all our good shows. We love her. Thank you so much. You were so influential last year with the work you did, and you've picked right up where you left off last year, and you're still kicking ass, and we appreciate that. My friend Soraya Foss, I spoke to her the other day. She says she would pray for you over there and what's going on in Syria, knowing where you're at. So she wanted to send a little shout out, but please let everybody know where they can find your stuff.
Well, the best place is probably Substack now, and then my Telegram and Twitter. Those are probably the three main ones, and Convo Couch, of course.
Oh, making me blush. And your Substack is linked in your bio of your Twitter.
Yeah.
So find your Substack.
Thanks to Fasta's advice, I'm hopeless at self-promoting.
I'm bad too. Fiorella makes fun of me all the time, calls me a boomer.
Yeah.
We love you, Vanessa.
Near the show, so he gets points for that. So
yeah,
yes, we love you, Vanessa. You're awesome. Thank you for coming on and having this discussion. We could probably have a whole 2 more hours talking about that whole situation. It'll happen again. Yeah, these motherfuckers. Okay. All right. Have a good night. Say hi to the dogs.
I will.
Oh yes, with Daisy.
Oh, Daisy's snoring over there. Daisy, that Fee thought was a boy. Everyone thinks she's a boy because she's so cute.
You know, you're
a tomboy.
I think you and Eva had pictures of dogs up on your Twitter, didn't you?
Yeah.
So cute. We love you, Vanessa.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Vanessa Beeley, everybody. That was fucking awesome. I love her. She's so influential. She does amazing work. If you want to know exactly what's going on in that region, if you want to know exactly what's going on in Syria, go to Vanessa Bailey and she will give you the scoop. Fam, is that it for today?
That is it for today, you guys. It was all Russia, Syria, China, Ukraine, big foreign policy stuff. Friday.
I got some Rockfins really quickly. I want to just ring through them because I forgot the yesterday's. Costello says Rockfin. Thank you so much, Costello, for the Super 8 contributions. Always appreciated on the couch. Cultist Demon says, I find it interesting that those most obsessed with the NWO, the New World Order, are living in the belly of the beast, the U.S. This is a right-wing projection. They are seeing enemies outside when the call is coming from the inside the house. They see enemies from outside when the call is coming from inside the house. I don't know if it's necessarily right-wing too. I mean, I think the right-wing populist right is expanding on it. I do feel there is some form of push for a new world order of sorts, but I don't think it's happening. I think it's failing miserably. And you see the BRICS nations just saying, peace, avoid the chicken grease.
Yeah.
And Alvin Johnson says, thanks for what you do. You're awesome. Thank you, Alvin Johnson, one of the chipmunks. Fam, I am going to Cuba tomorrow, so I will not be here on Friday while you're doing your thing with Mark Sloboda. And I think that would be awesome because you'll get a chance to go back and kind of reiterate what is going on with the situation with Moscow with Xi and Vladimir Putin. But guys, if you want to help out, my Venmo is right there at Craig Jardula, my Cash App, $Pasta Jardula. Please, every bit helps. I can't use my credit card there, so I got to bring cashola. I could move some money, I believe, to Bitcoin and get some Bitcoin in Cuba. We'll see. But any and all of your help is greatly appreciated and greatly needed because you guys make these things happen. Remember, we don't take corporate money, and that's why we can do these shows and say what we want to say, fam.
And and by the way, Cultist Demon, I think the whole global agenda is coming from the West, but I think that there is a push from some people to make somebody else be the culprit and to think everybody's in on it. This sort of idea, when really it's just impossible for all these countries to be in agreement, especially when we talk about China, Russia, and all these countries in Latin America. It's just not going to happen, and it is failing, I think. But yeah, anyway, help Pasta out. Fam, are you going to do anything tomorrow to maybe fundraise anything tomorrow?
I'm leaving early. I'm jumping on a plane, so that's early. I'm going to probably just say hello on the morning show, give out my information, and then bounce. But like you said, we're going to get organized on a few things coming. We have more trips planned in the queue. Argentina later this year. There's a lot of things going on. Maybe back to Cuba in May Day. But it's going to be very interesting. Cuba had 23 new sanctions thrown upon him when Donald Trump became president. He's the best wartime. He's anti-war president. But he was 23, just suffocating fucking sanctions on a country that was very highly dependent on tourism. But COVID really sacked that country and a lot of other countries. So we're going to go and get some reports from the people, the Cuban people, see where they're at. And hopefully we're going to go into the information ministry. I have the best Latin-speaking gringo coming with me, Wyatt Reed. He will be there with me. So the two of us will be there. That's awesome. Danny Shaw.
God.
Danny Shaw. What happens in Cuba?
It's a boys' trip.
Well,
it's a
none of the ladies wanted to come. I left the open table for them, but nobody came.
It's a white man's trip.
White man's trip. We're going to go into the information ministry and see if we can observe the elections. It might be a no, but we're going to go ask anyways. And if we can, that will be amazing. But if not, we'll make the best of our time and reporting on what's actually going on in Cuba and how the people are feeling from the
If anything, talk to the people. Yeah, exactly.
Power to the people. So that's it for today. We're out of here. Thank you so much. Once again, my links are down below. My Cash App, $ Pasta Jardula. My Venmo at Craig-Jardula. The white man. That's it for today. I am Pasta Jardula.
And I'm Purella.
Thank you so much.
Convo out.